My biggest milestone in real estate was a few years ago, and I hit over 500,000 in GCI.
Awesome.
Thanks.
That's crazy. That's huge. Today we have a special guest, Ashliey Wasson. She's a top producing agent in Hawaii and has sold over $100 million in real estate over the past decade. She also helps and also partners with investors on Philippine houses. And biggest part of all, she is a full-time mom. Welcome to the show, Ashliey.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I don't know if you remember this, but when I first started investing in real estate or first got started in Hawaii, you were a huge help to me. It helped just to navigate the market and help me to understand the whole Philippine and the whole process of just what it takes to be a real estate investor here. I don't know if you remember that or not.
Yeah, of course I do. You were one of those intelligent, nerdy type, ran the numbers. You were incredibly methodical about what you wanted to get into and how you wanted to get into it. And from day one, I was like, he's different. He's looking at it from an angle of immediately, how can you scale? How can you systemize? And that wasn't that common on residential house flipping here, at least in my experience working with investors. And look where it got you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. But I mean, I feel like over the past 5 years that I've been investing, I've also seen you make some really cool moves, to really blossom, building a team and really expanding your brand over the past few years. And it's kind of been very cool to watch your success as well too. But what were you doing before real estate, and how did you kind of get into real estate investing or real estate?
Before real estate, I went to school for paralegal.
Okay.
And I was big into scuba diving.
Okay.
So I lived in
paralegal and scuba diving.
Yeah. that pretty much explains me. I'm very polar opposites. Even when I'm writing, my A's will change while I'm writing. And in California, I moved from New Hampshire, Massachusetts. I drove across country one year when I was 20, I think,
okay.
No, I'm sorry.
Last year you're talking about.
I haven't looked the same, but I was 17 actually when I moved from New Hampshire. I drove across country in a bust up car and broke a microwave and a trash bag of clothes, and I moved to California.
Just striking it on your own? Would you go with somebody?
Yeah, I was on my own. And I don't know why I brought a broken microwave. That was silly. The plate was broken. And then I got to California, and there I was still working at Olive Garden, and they let me still work there when I was 17. Okay. And when I turned 18, I was getting insurance from this place called Cost You Less Insurance.
Okay.
Shout out if that's still around in California. It was a non-preferred insurance company. They hired me the day you turn 18, let us know. And I went in there and I was like, I'm 18 now. And they hired me on the spot, and I started working for that insurance company. Lived there for 2 years, and I got into construction because of someone I was dating back then.
Okay.
I was helping him finish projects.
Actually doing the work yourself?
Well, he ripped his finger off when we were water skiing one day.
Wow, okay.
And he couldn't do the work. It was his right hand. It was dominant hand. And we had planned to move to Hawaii on a whim. And so I ended up having to finish his projects for him.
Wow, that's crazy.
I know. And so I gathered a lot of skill sets.
Yeah, just from actual hands. You did hands-on construction.
Yes.
While as your first kind of foray into real estate.
I didn't know how valuable that would be down the line, because now when I walk into properties and I think I can see homes from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And then also when I'm working with investors, I can see when they have jobs and scopes of work.
If it's reasonable or not, you understand the process and everything.
I do. Or I'll be like, hey, give them a break because of this or that, or they won't be able to tell this and dictate that. And that's a lot more work than you think it would be.
Yeah.
So that was more valuable. I didn't realize it at the time. And then one of the places that we were working at was at a scuba diving shop and building a loft. And we exchanged the rest of the money that we owed, because he gave us scuba dive lessons for labor. So he got us into scuba, and that was the Kelp City of California, and fell in love. Got to Hawaii and I was like, I'm going to be a dive master and I'm going to live on the beach and be a scuba diver. And I would be homeless today, probably, if I kept that path, for sure. And I fell into real estate by a property manager.
So you started, when you say fell into real estate, you became a property manager in Hawaii?
No, a property manager. I was looking at a rental and I was living in Kalihi. And I was looking at places in Hauula and Ka'ava. And the property manager was like, you have a great personality. You should get into real estate. And I was 20.
As an agent, you mean?
As an agent.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, that's kind of how I got to Hawaii. Okay. Everything was like, sure, why not? Just go with it, go with the flow. And
so you got your license from at the discretion or with the advice the property manager. He said, hey, you make a great agent from your personality and like, I guess your warmth and your enthusiastic nature of things.
Yeah.
And so you got your license. And is that how like the whole journey started?
Yeah. The first year I was licensed with her. So when you get licensed, the brokerage holds their license either with the board of realtors or not. And she did not. And I didn't know what that meant back then. So this was like 13 years ago. And so I was working at her small office on the east side. And I would sit in open house. Her husband was also licensed. And I remember this other agent was like, why are you with this company? They have a bad reputation. They're not with the board. And I was like, I don't know. Because she told me to get into real estate. What is real estate? I have no idea what I'm doing here. Like I just say yes to things and I just go with it. And scuba diving wasn't going to be lucrative. And I hadn't finished my paralegal degree yet. And I didn't want to go back into insurance. So I just went with it. And I told her about it. And then things started kind of clicking as that whole first year, I was like, how do I real estate? What does that mean? There's a lot. You have to understand contracts. You have to understand how to search for properties. You have to understand how to show properties. How do you get lockbox info?
I think when like a lot of people, like our impression of real estate is selling sunset, right? Like you show up to parties and you wear nice clothes and then people give you money. And I think like that's just like like when people say like, I want to invest in real estate, that's what they picture. Just drinking with friends, having lunches, and then going on vacations, and then it's like you have a lifestyle by design because you're an agent, right? But I think when you first actually become an agent, it's a very different reality, especially when you're just starting out, right? So
1,000%. You have absolutely no idea what it entails. And I think people, when they get into it too, they think that someone's going to handhold them. They think someone's going to walk them through every step of the way and that they're going to walk in like they do to an insurance office and they have these checklists and someone's going to guide them on how to have these conversations. And you don't know how to have a conversation walking a client through a contract. You don't even know how to read the contract. And then not everyone's going to teach you how to read it, especially back then.
And so, I mean, that's like as an employee, when you start a new job, you get an instruction manual, you have someone to kind of coach you and like explain to you how to do everything, right?
Right.
But when you become like an entrepreneur, which an agent really is an entrepreneur, now you have to figure it out yourself, unless you join maybe like a team, someone like yourself, or some brokerage where there's like built-in training inside, right?
But 13 years ago, teams weren't a thing. 13
Back
years
then,
ago,
there was no teams.
No, teams were not a thing. Young agents was not a thing. Like I was in completely like foreign territory and the mentorship things that happen right now was not a thing. Certain brokerages came into real estate in the last decade and have completely changed the landscape of what real estate looks like. And it's this go-giver, give lots of information. All, the rising tides.
That's not how it was before, like when you first started.
No, I remember I wrote my first contract and I didn't even know how to you have to figure out how to log into 20 different things. And then I wrote my first contract and I'll never forget the broker I had. And I was at Keller Williams at the time. And it was a small satellite office with only like 8 agents.
Okay.
And he was just like, don't send me this unless we fill it out completely. This is junk. Figure it out, read it better and resend it to me. And I was like 20, confused. I lived in Hau'ula by myself, no mentorship, no office, no place to go. And I remember calling this agent, bless his heart, he really helped me a lot. And by help me, I mean like give me a couple sentences of information and then I had to run with it.
Yeah.
No one explained everything to me.
So you had to figure it out so it's kind of like half figuring out, but also help you get like little tidbits or little like small chunks of info that you kind of have to decide for yourself.
There was one agent and I would get a nugget and then I would run with that nugget and I would Google and research and I would figure it out. I failed forward so hard all the time. No one wanted to help really. And that was just a blessing. He was just really nice and cool and we jived. I feel like
people nowadays don't realize how spoiled we are. Like the whole age of social media, YouTube, and there's so many books with so much valuable information, mentorships, teams, like, and both the agent and the real estate investing side where there's before, I think maybe like 10 years ago, you can say like, I don't know because that's a good excuse. But now because there's so much opportunity and information available, like, I don't know is not a good excuse anymore. Right. So
everything you need is a click away. It's a TikTok video. It's a YouTube video away. Like, look at what the value you're bringing to your audience, right? By bringing in people who just think at a certain level or conversations, just to have an ear in certain conversations can be so valuable. You can get so much out of it if you like have the mentality to tap into it. And that wasn't a thing. And if it was, I didn't know about it. And I didn't know to get a mentor. I didn't know to read books. I didn't know to research certain things. And it was just a different day and age. And I think that it's great that all of these people have accessibilities, because I want, you know, more people to put food on their family's table. Yeah. So
it's like a pro and a con though, because back then, because there was a dearth of information, if you had it, it was way more valuable. Mm-hmm. But then like nowadays, because everybody has the same information, there's something else that has to separate you. But I think whether it's in that time or this time, it's the same separation. It's kind of like taking action and then like figuring things out. Back then it was a lot harder, but you still had to do it. But even now, there's a lot of people who have the things like information, but they still don't take action. They're not able to figure things out. You know what I mean?
Well, and I think that perspective has been very helpful with people sharing information, because they realize, like before when I started, and this is what the investor world looked like 13 years ago, because that's what I started working with investors when I got into real estate. And the landscape then to now is polar opposite, just as it is with agents. And it was keep your secrets, keep everything tight. You don't share anything. I could not get, like, those nuggets I got were absolute gold, and they were very far and few between. Like now you have so much information, you know, to the other point, the fire hose. Right. What's the right avenue? You know, and back then you did not have an abundant mindset. People did not want to help. Everyone was competition. It was cutthroat. And today there's a lot of collaboration. At least we've created this environment of, okay, all this information's out there, so what can we do? Well, we can work together now, because sharing something is better than not. So I like that.
No, me too. I mean, I think I got very lucky when I first started. It was already kind of like probably the tipping of the scales where everybody was kind of working together. I know you probably have some stories where people were like really gatekeeping and probably maybe very nasty to each other. We would love to hear some of these stories later, but I mean
exactly about when you got in, it had to have been within that like 12-month period. I started, at least from my perspective, seeing all these drastic changes where I'm seeing people like partner up on deals when normally they wouldn't. It's like you had your one partner and that was it. Like, and you guys, you know, would eventually break off because something sour happened, you know. And
what do you think was the tipping point? How did the culture change in that span?
I think social media, to be honest. I think social media has created this environment where there was a lot of information. And then all of a sudden, I remember a pivotal moment in social media where there was a narrative of saying you need to give information for free in order to be valuable and stand out, and that's how you'll get following. And when you give information for free, you realize like, oh,
there's another benefit.
You get monetary and just other benefits of people bringing things to you, because they might have a deal as an investor or for a realtor, not know what to do with it, nor want to. And then I saw these partnerships started forming. And then I saw like people started liking, enjoying the partnership aspect of winning and losing together. And then the meetups started happening, and that became really cool because
was there no meetups when you first started?
There was like one or two. It was, you paid for them. So there was a free one that I know happened quite consistently. And it was a very different environment that was like formulated at like a bank or at a place inside of a room.
Like a little more stuffy, a little more like corporate or kind of feel to it.
And the deal analysis that I saw in there, to be honest, like to be frank, like a lot of them are fluff. They're not accurate at all. So again, that perceived success was still and is still current. And I think that's important though, because if people really knew how hard it was, they wouldn't get into it. So I think that's important. And then it wasn't fun. It wasn't like exciting but it was fun to learn. So the room looked very different than it does now.
You're always, whenever you're doing something new, you're always growing as a person, right? And whenever you're learning something new, I think that's kind of like what sparks our like passion or like what we enjoy in life, because we always want to be progressing forward. I think whenever you stagnate, that's kind of like when you start to get depressed or things are not as much fun. But like when you, especially as a new agent, I think the very first part is very fun, but also very difficult because there's no money coming in, right?
Right. Like for 6 to 12 months. So you've got to, same with investing though.
Exactly the same. So kind of walk us through that first year of trying to figure it out. When it was like how many houses did you sell that first year, or how many appointments did you get?
I got one pity sale, that broker. I was like, how do I get business? She's like, hand out one business card a day. And I was like, where do I get a business card? Like, I'm telling you nothing. Like there was no guidance. Like now you join a company and they're like, we'll design it for you, click on this and you can do, I'm like, what Vistaprint I don't even think was around yet. Like maybe they were, I don't know. And I would wear a name tag and I would go into the grocery store and Starbucks and I would spark up conversation with people randomly.
Just cold introduction. Just talking to people.
I don't even know how to real estate, mind you. Like, I'm like, yeah, I'm a realtor. And they're like, oh, you are? What kind? of like, the kind that sells a house, I think. I don't know what that does. But that first year I got a pity sale. She had a client. I was like, look, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep driving here. I live in Hau'ula. I can't keep driving down here. You know, but I took it very serious. I was a hustler. She gave me half of a commission on a deal she was doing because I was doing all the grunt work.
Okay.
And then...
So how much was that half a commission?
I think I got $2,500.
Okay. So for the whole year, the first year of real estate investing, you basically made $2,500.
I had to pay taxes on that. So and then
the income
all
tax.
all the gas probably cost me money to be in real estate. Oh, well, I still had to pay to get my license. So I think I was negative maybe $4,000 the first year.
Plus, I mean, like all your living expenses, like rent, food, like all other things. Like not even counting that. That's just like your straight quote unquote like job or like your real estate career, right? So
1,000%. It was rough. But I'd say the second year I left that brokerage and it was not on the best terms. It's a different story for another time. I ended up going to Keller Williams. Okay. And when I went to Keller Williams, there was a broker who owned a house next to me where I was renting. He got me over there, and I had another person to call. Again, very like small nuggets of information. Lots of crazy things happened. Again, Hau'ula isolated, would get stuff stolen all the time. Like it was there's no networking out there. Yeah. It's very country. Yeah. And a decade ago, it was very different too. So I would drive around, and I don't know where I got this concept from. And I would drive around. If I saw people at a house and it looked abandoned, I would pull over into like these sketchy abandoned buildings and be like, hey, is this your house? Can I sell it for you? Like, and looking back, don't do that, especially in that part of the island. But that's how I got into an investor my second year. Okay. So
you met an investor at one of those houses.
At an abandoned house that I was driving by, and I pulled over asking if they were the owner because I wanted to help them. And they're like, no, but we're trying to get a hold of the owner. Okay. Maybe you can help us. In fact, there's another house for sale around the corner. Can you get us into it? And I'm like, sure. And I'm like, didn't know how to get into it. And I was figuring it out. And it was like an old meth house. And I think there was someone sleeping in the closet. I don't remember, but we got through like a broken door. And I did contact the agent and let him know we were going in there. I ended up representing them on that house and then 2 others on that street. But it wasn't my first sale. That was my second sale. My first sale was an oceanfront house in Hau'ula, on the street I lived on. And that house was for sale for a while. And I saw it no longer for sale. And I asked the neighbor next door, she was a nosy older woman. And I was like, hey, do you know what's going on with that house? Can I get their information? I had to snoozy up to her. I had to go wash and brush her horses. And I had to make baklava with her in the afternoons and spend a lot of time with her. You're really putting like a
lot of work for these first few deals, like so much effort to go into just kind of getting these first few listings.
Oh yeah. And I eventually, she had a book of all of the neighbors' information she was collecting because she was a true OG Karen. And she collected their information. She finally gave it to me. That was my first listing. And I sat that listing 5-6+ days a week. I just put signs at the end of the house. I bought a hotspot at Verizon and I would work from there. And I just sat open house for like 4 to 5 hours a day, every single day, getting business. And that's how I probably got the first 100 people in my database. It's just sitting that open house for like half a year. And then when I worked with those investors, they did something that I would never advise anyone to do, any realtor to do. But back then, investor agents weren't really common. You didn't have a lot of investor-friendly agents. And they said, do for half the commission, or you credit us a certain percent, and then you'll get the full commission on the back end, which you get sale, more. And I was like, okay, great. I don't know how to sell a property. Sure, sounds great. I'm just here to learn. And I helped them all the way until I had a major surgery, and they were really brutal. They were like, if you don't get this done, I don't care if you're having surgery or not, then we're moving on to the next. And I remember like going under and like finishing an email, waking up, not taking anything to finish doing it. Like cutthroat. Very cutthroat, very harsh. Like the craziest properties, the craziest situations. I can get into almost any situation today with an investor and I would know how to navigate it. because these were absolutely Wild West type of deals. And a lot of brokers I come across still don't experience or run into these things.
Yeah.
And then I didn't get the listings on the back end. I remember one deal I worked for $200.
They promised you for the listings on the back end, but then actually when it came time to that, they didn't give it to you?
Well, I messed up. I made a mistake in my younger years. Again, I was like 22 at that age, and I had made an error of judgment. And so that was why. But
what was the error in judgment?
A realtor in Ka'ava asked me to show she was listing the houses on the back end. At that point, she asked me if I could show the property for her, for a buyer who called on it, because I lived out there. And I said, sure, no problem. She said I could represent them. I showed them all 3 houses. It was the 7-Eleven in Ka'ava, and I showed all 3 of them. And they wanted to go back and look at the back house, and the back door was left open. And they had a cooler, a Yoda, and they had a cooler of beers in the back. And they cracked open a beer, and they're like, "You want one?" And I was like, "Oh, sure." And I held the beer, even though I didn't drink Coors Light. I still held the beer, and that door was left open in the back house because I locked up everything, but I didn't realize the back one was still open. The neighbor called the seller and was like, "You had a realtor here. She was drinking beer. She left your property unsecured." And I was like, it sounds like that, but that's really not how it went.
It's like all the worst, like it's almost become like a sitcom, right? It's like a episode of Seinfeld or something.
They're like, "You're lucky we're not reporting you, taking your license." I was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." And I was 22. I was very inexperienced. But these people would just absolutely chew and use and abuse me. They knew they could. They knew that they could have
advantage of the situation and stuff. So.
For years, I was like running myself into the ground. Christmas, Thanksgiving, they didn't care. I remember being like New Year's one year just crying because they just had me working. I was going to the DPP for them. I was going to Board of Water for them. I was doing everything. If I sent them, they would email me like really vulgar things back. Like, learn to title your emails appropriately. Don't just forward me anything. So this is really a growth process, right? So it was it's looking back, it's probably like you look back, this really sucked, but it probably helped shape to who you are today. Like you're so much more experienced, talented, and you have so much more grit because you had to kind of go through the grind of those. How many years was it were you working with these investors? 3 to 4 years.
Okay.
No, it was 4 years because I got burnt out and I pivoted to VA, veteran loans for a while. Okay. And I would go on military bases. I think it was 4 years actually. And then I got a little burnt out with working with investors. And then I got my break and I took that knowledge over to military and local families. Yeah. And then I was like, this is quite rewarding. I didn't realize a lot of people didn't understand how to deal stack, how to find a deal, how to get creative on transactions back then. So then I would convert that over to, everyday
the skill sets you're kind of building, like wherever you go, you're kind of building upon it. And like you're bringing this new skill set to like a new audience. Yeah. And the new audience is like, wow, we've never heard of this before. This is amazing. But like, so you're like a rock star wherever you go now because of like all the different kinds of experiences and challenges you had during that time of like working with that difficult investor.
I'm so grateful to them, truly. And honestly, like I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have, a broker who would take care or ask or answer any of my questions. And even though they didn't do it the right way and they were absolutely emotionally and mentally abusive, I thank them so much because I could take it and I could handle it. I learned a lot. And
you
very
grew
grateful.
Through it, right? I feel like this. I think someone talked about this before. Is when challenges come your way, you grow through it, right? You can either shy away and kind of shrink back, or you can grow through it. And it sounds like you really blossomed during this time, where like you might not feel like at the time, but after looking back, it's like you really grew through this, and like now you're like the Ashliey Wasson that we all know and love today.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely, it watered the plant for sure. But I have a lot of other experiences with investors. I've seen a lot of them, how they involved. I saw what happened to those investors. Okay. And then there was another, duo in town that was like the big residential investor in the island. And I saw them come and go. And then I just started seeing these trends of other big ones, over time, over the last decade.
Why do you think that is where investors will come and go? What's like the cause or the reason for that?
I thought about that not that long ago. Like, why is it there's this trend where you really start to see a certain name and it becomes like the name? And I realized it was just as simple as getting too big, too big too fast. So over leveraging and moving money around where they shouldn't, they start to spiral. And I imagine a large portion of that is the team. So the contractor, I think, is a huge pivotal moment.
Because you have a really unique perspective on investing, because you're an agent, but you also have worked with probably like, I want to say like tens, maybe like even hundreds of different like real estate investors on both the buy and the sell side. And even you've partnered with some in the past as well too on some of these different deals. And so like you really can see like you have an insight scoop onto like what works and what doesn't work, you know? And so like, I just super curious as like, give us like your thoughts on just investing, real estate investing in general. Why do some investors do well and some investors struggle?
I think it gets really exciting when you get into a deal.
Yeah.
And then I think once you realize how easy, once you understand a deal and once you understand how to get money that's not yours, that's thrilling. And when people entrust you with the money, and then
when
you
borrow money for or partner with money with people to like fund your deal, I see. Yeah.
So when you figure out hard money and private money, and you figure out how to get access to that money, and then you put your first deal together, I think it's like a tattoo. I've seen people get addicted to getting deals, and then they get more deals. I found like once you get a few under your belt, people start giving deals. And then I started seeing people take on more than they probably should have because they didn't have the processes or the systems in place or the mentorship. And then about, 3 to 4 years in is about the turnaround cycle that I saw, where they would get into a couple deals,
too many deals, and then like
they would close, they would have a profit margin. Then I would find like somewhere in the 5th to 6th deal, there would be a really big loss, and they weren't properly set up, whether they didn't save their proper funds and they didn't think that they had to fund their own projects or losses or whatever it might be. And then I found that the contractors got too busy. They would give out their contacts, and then those contacts would be spread too thin, and then their projects. And I also found that with that hard money, that was a really big factor for people on their deals. The hard money draws, when they would get the draws, I noticed if the draws didn't come in consistently and fluid, I was noticing pretty across the board projects stalling. And being the background when I did, because I did construction for a little while, I know what the morale and the momentum of a project looks like. And when you have all of the tools on site and you have all of the men on site and they're excited, they get stoked. They're humans. They have emotions. They get stoked on a deal. They love to see a transformation. And then once money's not flowing, they're like, why am I going to go to a job if I don't have why are we doing windows if we don't have, the siding yet? Why are we doing this? And then you start piecing these projects together, and that really upsets the contractors. And now they're struggling to send one guy or two guys, or no one.
That's a very real thing. I think people call it like project fatigue, or things where like just the momentum, right? Where like when you start a project out, like you fund the contractors, like they're like excited to do the work. Then like, let's say you don't pay them, or like there's not enough money from the draws they're supposed to be getting from the hard money lender. Now like, okay, now like they're going to take a break, and then like they taking that break kind of just shuts down the momentum, and then coming back is like 10 times harder than like when you first started in the beginning. And so it's such like a cycle of like downward spiral that I think you really have to be cognizant of that when you are running a project as a project manager or as an investor.
Yeah, it's a balance. You got to keep the morale up with the team, thank the guys who are there, understand, but also be firm and show up. And the other thing that I also observed with investors who showed up at the projects or had a project manager consistently showing up at the projects, I found those have been far more successful than the ones who don't, or would go once a week, or would just do check-ins. And I find, especially at the beginning and at the end, the middle, if you don't have the capacity, that made a huge difference as well. And I think some people just didn't catch on to that. And, permitting. When permitting started getting backed up, and it's this wild card, if a neighbor calls on something, I found once you get into a permitting issue, that kind of starts to spiral
another
the project.
Stall of the project. So being an investor here in Hawaii, I've experienced both, where when I first started, I would be on the project every day because I'm gung-ho, I want to see it. And so I'm talking to contractors, I'm making friends with them, buying them lunch, etc. And the project will go pretty smoothly. After I kind of got a few more projects under my belt, and I'm like, I'm an investor. I don't need to waste my time on the project. Then like you kind of like take a step back and you just check in with them like or phone calls or not even check in with them, and just assume that people are going to be doing the work.
Right.
That's when the project kind of like took a little bit longer, and like the work a little bit like more shoddy. You're not there to catch errors. And I think that's a very common mistake, because like the people get preached to where like your time is more valuable than like being at the project. But then like you do need to show up to the project. You do need to make sure that things are getting done. There needs to be some kind of accountability by like a physical presence, I think, at the projects.
And I think having, there's different ways to do deals. And I think getting your first deals under your belt and having to work with the draws as they come. Or I know there's some lenders who have different draw structures. So understanding the different types of loan products for these, if you are not leveraging your own money, if it's not liquid cash. I think another way to handle that though is having, once you get some projects, once you get some money, have a reserve of your own.
That's really good. Yeah.
And then that way you can fund these projects. So that way you keep your team.
Right?
Right. And you're not stalling, and then you pull the draws and then you just pocket again. And I think when like realtors, right? I can't tell you how many times like people are like, what's the biggest piece of advice that you can get someone who's getting into real estate? And I have two. Put money aside for taxes.
Okay. That's important.
Treat it like a business. Have a calendar, like time block as a business. Don't, I'm working at a beach. Like everyone wants that sexy lifestyle, but at the end of the day, you also treat yours like an actual business. It might have a bit more luxuries and tied to it. You might have better vacations or more time off, but you still structure as a business. But put money away for taxes.
No, that's super important. I think people don't even realize that even as flippers or real estate investors, like the taxes that you like, because it's not just all profit, right? Like they have to put aside for taxes. There's other things that you have to pay for, some marketing or some cash reserves. And I think once we figure out cash reserves, that really helped to make our projects a lot smoother, because honestly, like it's like a pain trying to get the draws from these hard money lenders sometimes. So like if you don't have the cash reserves available to fund the project and the renovation, now your project gets like stalled, exactly what you're talking about. But as long as you have the cash reserves to stomach that, then like you can fund it with your own money, get the draws afterwards. Sometimes you never even get the draws too on some of these projects, but then like the project will go forward to completion, and then now you can like at least like keep your momentum going during that whole process, right?
Exactly. And we're referring to people who do burrs or house flips, and they're specifically using those types of funds. I have other investors who just do their own funds, their own capital. They do a project, they take the proceeds, they hold it. We find another lot.
Keep rolling it over like the same.
Yeah. And they'll take the proceeds and they'll take their 1031 or their retirement, and they fund their own project 100%. So I know certain people's perspectives are like, never use your own money, always leverage, yada, yada, but they never have to be at the mercy of certain things. So I see the benefits there as well. And they just are very picky about their deals, and their profit margins are larger because they do few, and they have their parameters are a lot more strict.
So, there's pros and cons to both sides, and there's no right or wrong way, but you have to be aware of like the caveats or things you're going to challenge that you're going to face on both sides, right? One is like harder to do more deals, but then it's safer. The other ones you can do more deals, but it's a lot more, you have to take on more risk. You have to be prepared for like the cash reserves that are going to be needed for those. So
and both have both have risks, right? One, you lose your own money. One, you lose someone else's money. Either way, it's not.
Well, if you lose someone else's money, it's still your money because you got to pay it back, right? So I mean, in all sense of it. So
I've seen a lot of people. I've seen a lot of good and bad deals for sure.
What's maybe like do you have any crazy stories of like an investor you work with or things went really badly, or like, I mean, just like
out of respect for the people I work with, I don't want to.
Sure.
I don't want to share because I think all investors have their losses, and there's no judgment for anybody who goes through those. But I've handheld some pretty hard, let me speak on one that's not a big loss. Yes, I have had investors who've lost things close to 7 figures before. Wow. I wasn't involved on the buy side. Something I will say, an observation too, that has led to some people's demise, because a loss like that can bankrupt someone. Yeah,
definitely.
The realtors who are representing on the buy side. The
buy side, okay.
Yeah, they will get these investors into one, I think, and I've had to teach a lot of agents this as well. Even if an investor has a lot of success or has done a lot of deals or a few deals, still treat them as if they haven't done any deals.
Okay.
Because a lot of the times they have all these systems in place, but no one goes back to the basics with them, right? And they don't memorize the contract per se. They might know some of the contingencies, but just treat them. Why not, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt for them to get the rerun every time. It's, you know, again, it's like going to the project. It's not a waste of their time.
Yeah.
Really, you're just further informing them. If anything, making them a better expert as well. So like investors, there's two perspectives, right? And so whenever I'm training a new agent, I always say like what you don't have in experience, you have in time.
Yeah.
So you're hungry, you're aggressive, you have all the time to deal search and do all these things. But with that also they don't have experience. And if they don't have the experience, then they don't necessarily know what a good deal is. And so the investor should always vet their own deal. It is never the realtor's responsibility to get a deal, right? However, a lot of investors have the perspective, and that's a B2B. It's a business to a business. However, it is residential real estate. So you're still in the eyes of the law considered a consumer. So the liability still lies on the broker and the agent. And they get into these deals and they're expecting these investors to have the know-how and the experience to know if they're getting into a good deal as well. And so they'll be like, well, I sent you the deal and this is the scope and blah, blah, blah. They don't necessarily, especially if they're new, say, but did you do a plumbing scope underneath? Did you get 3 bids? How long have you known this contractor? If you're doing a condominium project that's, 3 houses that you're building, how wide is the street? You don't know to ask these questions or tell them to ask their team the questions. They get into a deal and they can't run, they can't sell the projects that they're anticipating. So the numbers don't line up. And they are hungry. They need the sale to close. So even if it's not the best deal, they'll also inflate the after repair value. And they'll be like, here's some comps, and they'll create these comps, and they have no idea what your design is going to be. They don't know if you're going to do a Home Depot special, if you're going to bring in custom items, and they'll tell you that the resale value is going to be 1.5 million or 2 million. And really I come in there and I'm like, you're 1-2 tops. I don't see with what you did, there's anything that we can do to make this sell for 1.5. And so I would take over a lot of agents' listings. And I've started seeing that again in this market where when I first started, I was taking over certain investors' listings because agents couldn't sell them. And I'd come in
on the back end, you mean so they flipped them already and they're trying to sell them. And so you're trying to clean up the mess that like maybe another agent kind of like started.
Well, they got the deal. They listed it. They've been on market for 3 months, 6 months, however many months with an agent, and it's not selling. So they'll come in and be like, Ashliey, can you help us? I'll see if there's anything that I can do, any advice that I can give to make it more marketable. And then we come in and hopefully, we sell in a timely manner. That stopped through COVID because the market was hot, right? And I'm starting to see that happen more again now where I'm taking over some listings that aren't selling. Not to any cause of any agent, it's just sometimes fresh eyes. It's not like intentional, it's just it happens, right? And like you're as an agent, you're selling things with like rosy colored eyes because like your objective is to kind of like build clients, right? And so like it's not necessarily like your job honestly is not to make sure that the investor makes money. I mean, it is like, it would be nice, but like that's not ultimately your responsibility. It's the investors to get the good deal. So realtors will bring them the deal and then they'll be like, investors, it's a good deal. And then you guys have to make the analysis. However, I do think that there is a fine line of giving a really realistic resale value. And the investor, you guys do have to do due diligence, but that's where I do feel like as a professional, we do have the ethical boundary of making sure that we're giving as accurate of a resale value as we can. So asking the right questions. What are you going to do if you add, so I do something like if you add curb appeal and you do something creative and different and you make it unique, I think your resale value could go in this range. And if you don't, I think it can go in this range. And that way you have a plan A and plan B. And I'm always conservative. That's one thing I really appreciate and respect about you, I think. And so you've always been very conservative on the front end, which is like, I appreciate because most realtors that we talk to are not conservative on the front end, but like, I feel like when you give me a after repair value, I think I can trust Ashliey's value because like you're pretty consistent as far as just being conservative and really looking out for our best interest. And I think like it's not like something that's common across like the board for other realtors, but just like one thing that I really like appreciate about just working with you like over the past few years. Thank you. And I pride myself. So no investor, knock on wood, that I have ever gotten and represented on the buy side has ever lost money on the resale side.
That's a big feather in your cap.
Yes. However, I have sold a lot of properties for investors. I did not represent them on the buy side, and I've taken over and they've taken some big losses and my heart hurts because I want them to stay around. Everyone has a family and they have something and man, it hurts my heart for them when they lose. And I'm like, can you guys just call me, even if I don't represent you on the buy side?
To double check.
And I will just double check your ARV for your after repair value for you. Just so you don't get into a bad deal.
This is like some really good advice coming from your perspective on like an unbiased kind of view of like what's going on. And like as investors, we sometimes we get really hungry. We just want deals, but like having like a sane person like yourself, like, hey Ashliey, can you just double check and make sure like this does make sense? Is my ARV really, or after repair value really 1.5? And like, actually no, Daniel, it's closer to 1.2. Like that would help save so many people so many heartaches like down the line. So
yeah, and I think I don't mind doing that for people, especially if I have a relationship or not. It doesn't matter, because I want people to get into a good deal. And it always comes full circle. At some point, like if I'm just always providing value to people and I care, because I genuinely care, then I get business somehow down the line in some form or fashion somewhere.
I think so. It's kind of like weird how the universe works, where like giving out value and being generous, like somehow it just always comes back double fold. Like, and like it's not like something like you don't expect it. It's almost like a roundabout way, but somehow it just was able to like kind of find you again, you know? So
yeah. I agree.
But talk us through that. Like you had like a couple of big years to reach you sold over $100 million in real estate. Like what was like maybe like the biggest year you've had as far as like as an agent?
It was under 30 million. I'd say my biggest milestone in real estate.
Okay.
And I didn't think about it until you asked the question, like right before we jumped on this. My biggest milestone in real estate was a few years ago, and I hit over 500,000 in GCI.
Awesome.
Like, thanks.
That's crazy. That's huge.
Yeah, it was exciting. That was, it was well over 500,000. And I was like, wow, that's just really cool to look at, you know? And I didn't think I would never went in with sales of like, I need to achieve, I always wanted to achieve certain sales volume just because I need something to work towards. I need to have a goal, but it wasn't because I wanted to, make a certain amount or anything like that. And then I also learned that tax year.
That's a big tax year.
That was a big tax year. Because in real estate, you have your state, your federal, your GET, and you have self-employment tax.
Yeah.
And then I have an S Corp. I actually have multiple S Corps for different businesses that I have as well. So
that hurt on like when you saw that bill, whatever, in January, December that year, like that was like a
big lesson learned. You're so focused on achieving goals that I wasn't focused on my write-offs. I didn't acquire other assets in order to shelter enough because I was so driven on that.
But sometimes it's really helpful to just like stay focused in your lane, and then like don't worry about not paying taxes. I mean, like paying too much taxes. Just focus on making like the income, and then like later on, those problems will work themselves out like in the future, right? So
yeah, they have that now. Yeah. Like I've started to figure it out now. Like a few years later, that's the new milestone. You just keep going up from there.
The big thing I think I see the kind of like newer guys run into is where they get so focused on trying to save money from taxes, they don't put enough focus to actually making the money.
Right.
And so like that's like I'd rather pay too much taxes because I made too much money than like, I saved a lot of taxes, but I didn't make any money kind of thing, So like just where you put your focus and your time and energy. Yeah,
exactly. I don't want to put too much there. However, also I don't necessarily believe in the taxes that we have to pay. So at some point I want to get savvy enough to understand how to give less taxes away at some point. So I'm not super savvy in that department. Maybe more some, I know more than some, but definitely not more than most. Learning that every year. And then as I pull out different investments, or as I'm building on other things, it's becoming more and more important that I make that a focus soon.
So you've had an amazing career over the past decade. What's next for Ashliey Wasson? What are your goals for the future? What are kind of your dreams moving forward?
I think that's a great question. I think about it often. So I'm very goal oriented, as I mentioned. So every quarter I do a mastermind and I look at my numbers. I look at my goals.
Talk us a little bit about that. So every quarter you have like a goal setting. How does that work and what do you do for that?
In 2020 for New Year's, we went to a hotel and then wanted to do New Year's resolution. And I was like, this sounds great and all. It was very informative. And I go there and I have a specific regiment now. And I look at everything that I have going on. I look at all of my numbers. I look at the whole state's numbers. I look at every aspect of my businesses and my personal life. And then I do a SWOT, and then I decide, okay, what do I need to pivot on this year? What are the 3 things that I need to focus on for my marketing or my niche or whatever it might be? What are the 5 things that I'm going to do to focus in on those things? And then I'll go back and I say, however, everyone burns out on their goals. You forget after 3 months.
Yeah.
So I was like, this has to be quarterly. And then since 2020, January, it's been quarterly every 3 months, going back into...
So you actually take out like a few days, maybe is it one day or a couple of days? How many days do you take?
Friday to Sunday.
So like a whole weekend, you go to a hotel, you get out of like your typical like pattern, and then you just spend time planning, reviewing, and kind of like strategizing for the next year or quarter.
Yeah. So every quarter, I go into a hotel. I get someone to watch my dogs. I get someone to watch my daughter. It's very expensive to do this. And go into a really nice room. It has to be someplace that's inspiring.
Yeah, that's important. Like the atmosphere that you're in, like really changes like how you view and see things, right? So I think that's a really cool spot where you go to like a nice hotel, like really have like maybe it's like the ocean or the view where like you feel inspired for like the future. You always make the best like decisions and goals when you feel inspired versus when you're on the day-to-day grind, right?
Correct. And some people would find that unrealistic and get room service, or I go to one really nice dinner while I'm doing it, and I lock myself into that room. I only schedule, I get a yellow notepad, and then I have this erasable notepad, and I create a schedule. So that night I get there for the next 2 days, I time block what time I'm going to wake up, how long I'm going to focus on each subject. So 3 hours, I'm focusing on my SWOT and my business for Oahu Lux Homes. And I'm looking at what are my current numbers? What was last quarter's numbers? What was my goal? Am I achieving that goal? What do I have to do? And how do I pivot for the remaining quarters to achieve that? And then I will go to the next business. I have a transaction management company, and I'll move to that business. And then I also own a recording studio, Sounds Better Studios, and I'll move over to that business. And then at some point, usually on the last day, I pivot to personal. So I have certain personal goals for passive income or for my rentals or my portfolio. What am I going to do there? And then I go to my family. Like, what are my date nights looking like? What's my daughter dates looking like? What are the family vacations? What was my goal at the beginning of the year? And I actually color code them based off of quarter. So I write down everything that I want in January to achieve and what I want. And then I go and I break that up and I color code it I check box it what quarter of that year I should achieve that by. And then I color code it on the other sheet next to it, and I write them out and I break it up. And then that next quarter I evaluate, I check off the box in the color of that quarter to see if I achieved it or not.
I love this so much. This is like so inspirational, but it works so well. I think just like setting goals and constantly like holding yourself accountable to them, right? And I think
it's game changer.
It's like I've only started doing this kind of recently, but it's really like supercharged like your focus and like where you're putting your time, because you're really putting like their time and energy into things that really move the ball forward to your goals, as opposed to just kind of letting life happen to you, right? You're like really like focusing your energy and time. And like I really love this. I think talking to one of our coaches, like Ryan Pineda, he said his job as like a business owner is just thinking. Like, you know, like it's crazy. Like you're doing zero like actual work, but then like you're just thinking and making decisions during this time where it's really moving the ball forward more than if you're to actually do the work. Obviously you need like a combination of both. You can't just think all the time and not do any work. But if you just get into the habit of just working and not setting aside time for thinking, now it's just like you're less motivated. There's like you're making like less efficient decisions, and like the things are not moving as fast as like they could be.
And I still battle that. And that's why I do those quarterly masterminds, because I do have a team and I do have these other companies. And if I did put myself in a position where I just think and I innovate and I put people in place, I could probably do a lot more than what I have. But I'm so stuck into actually still working and selling real estate myself, because I really do like it. And because I feel this passion of getting good deals in place. And I love it. At the end of the day, I haven't been able to pull away from actually doing sales myself. So that trickles into leadership and how do I manage these businesses. So setting that time aside and thinking and working on the business, not in the business, guarantees me every quarter for several days, I'm out of my day-to-day routine and I'm inspired. I will get into a total... I don't have to cook. I don't have to clean. I don't have to pick up anything dog. I don't have fur on me. I don't get distracted by the dishes or my baseboards. And I can just think and get really creative. And my best ideas have come. In fact, the transaction management company came from that. And so did the Sounds Better, my studio as well.
It's crazy like when you have like kind of, there's like a weight on your shoulders of just like the tasks you have to do every day, right? Like there's responsibilities and just like things that you have to do. And there's always taking like a little bit of space in your mind. But if you can just take all that off and like, hey, like put this into this corner to get it completely free. Now you have like the full like 100% of like your bandwidth to kind of just think and make good decisions or game plan, dream, whatever. And I think that's so powerful as far as just like as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, to be able to do things like that, right? So
it's essential, especially if you're working in it. Then you got to carve that time out. If you're not working in it, then maybe you can get away with doing that like on Fridays. But I can't. I'm also a full-time mom.
Yeah,
so.
No, that's another whole nother thing. And so like props to you for like all that you do, plus like raising a beautiful daughter.
Thank you. She's got a beautiful soul. I'm very lucky to have her.
I mean, I've seen her time to time, and like she's a reflection of you, really. Like the warmth and like the way that you live your life. It's really like it's like mother, like daughter, you know. And so like you should be very proud of yourself.
Thank you. Feels like a copy paste sometimes, for sure. I look at her and I'm like, also, I kind of wish I had her childhood too. Like I look at the things that we do and I'm like, that would be nice. I wish I had that.
But so like maybe someone who's just starting out in real estate or just starting as an investor, what kind of advice would you give to someone who's like, they want to be like Ashliey or they want to be like one of your investors? What would you give to somebody like that?
You have to be willing to sacrifice and whatever that looks like. I don't think you should ever sacrifice, your family, your kids per se. So the best thing to do in a situation where you have a family and kids is get them involved in your goals.
Okay.
So at our house, we have a thermometer and it's on an acrylic sign and I ordered it from Etsy.
Okay.
And we put our goal in there. And, mommy's goal is to get 100 million in real estate in a year. Okay. And so as the quarter goes on or the month goes on, I have my daughter fill out the thermometer. And when we hit certain milestones, we get to do something as a family or together. And like 1 year was Disneyland. And so I achieved my goal and we got to go to Disneyland. So you guys are working
together towards this goal together. So she's invested, you're invested because like the milestones are like going to benefit both of you guys.
And if you don't have kids and it's just a significant other, then maybe that's a certain trip that you guys have always wanted to go on or, I can say to my daughter and I can say to my significant other, like, I know I'm working really hard right now. And I know, mommy's on her phone. At least I get to be present with you here and I'm not behind a computer. Also, remember, we're trying to achieve this goal. So if you can be patient with me here, then I can take off a full weekend and do something with you there. And I promise I won't be doing this. But I also have my cutoff times. Like I've had to learn over the years.
Setting boundaries and stuff.
Yes.
So
boundaries, that's my second piece of advice is boundaries. So no matter if you're young and hungry or if you're experienced or not, if you still want to set some boundaries, whatever that looks like for you, because you're going to get burnout and or you're going to lose things that are important to you. Still have the grit, do everything and do it hard and don't expect anything from anyone. When you look for a mentor, when you look for someone to guide you, that doesn't mean that they handhold you and they tell you everything to do every step of the way. That means they give you a seed and you go plant that seed and you water it. So find your mentorship, don't feel entitled by the information and then set boundaries for yourself and for your family. And do something fun. Like you've got to figure out something fun, whether that's like hiking or surfing or pickleballing.
I love it. Like such great advice to all areas and so inspired by your journey and so excited to see what you're going to do in the next few years, Ashliey. So thank you for coming on. Where if people want to reach out to you, where can they find you? Instagram. I've got a funky little I in my name. So it's Ashliey with an I, ASHLIEY, W, Facebook, TikTok. I'm an emailer. But Instagram would definitely, I check my messages all the time. Great. Well, thanks for coming on this show and we'll got to get you on another episode one of these days. Thanks for having me, guys.